send a message to you.
It's a little after 2. You may notice the wrong old fat white guy sitting up here at the head of this thing. Don Durden was not feeling well earlier this morning. He contacted me, and out of an abundance of caution, thought better to stay home. So this is what you get. You're going to have to put up with me. We have Dale Yulberg's dealing with a family medical situation of some sort, and somebody else is not here because of conflict. Tim Vanwolf had a legal thing blow up in his face that he had to be at right this second. So we're struggling. I almost was going to swear in the audience earlier, about 10 minutes ago, so we can conduct any business, but I don't think that's necessary. Okay, we'll start with opening remarks. Steve, you'll go around from that direction. Anything?
I made it.
You made it. You're here. Congrats.
That's it.
You have 8.
You? No? All right. I was just going to say we've had a couple of meetings now for our Kendall County Trails Subcommittee group, and it's actually been a pretty productive time. And yeah, we're making progress. We're going to try to stay in step with sort of the transportation, the full committee's general schedule of So we don't want to drag too slow, nor do we want to sprint too far ahead. And we also, one of the things we're trying not to do is, we're not going to put anything out into the public realm that's not actually coming through the Transportation Planning Committee. So we're just going to move very cautiously as far as making sure that we're in step with you guys. But we are making good progress. I think that's fair to say. I'm getting nods out there. All right. That's all.
Good. I want to briefly address at least one of the agenda items on today's agenda. I presume everybody out there has one. Last meeting you heard that we have an informal intention to wrap this up by mid-year, which means we have 12 more meetings counting this one to get from here to there. So one of the items on this agenda, and I have some copies to hand out to the audience when we get to it, is the first draft of what the schedule looks like for that to happen. And it's a fairly sobering look at it. Very doable, but it's going to take some real discipline and driving to getting some votes done and starting to populate buckets and getting on with it. But I just wanted everybody to know that's coming. One of the important things I want to say over and over today, because it's going to be easy to misconstrue what's happening as this rolls out. We've been calling out short-term projects and long-term projects. We've been talking about various policies. And what we've weeded out is the ones that didn't even deserve full committee hearing, much less a vote that it would become an official recommendation. So our next step, of course, is to get to that second level. We're not quite done with the first, but we're almost. And then we're going to get to the one where the committee's deciding what are real recommendations. At that point, the sheer number of projects is quite likely to be still pretty large compared to what we've told the city councils and the county commissioners that we would give them. So a final role that we're going to have as a committee, once we say we have 25 approved short-term projects, is to prioritize those so we can identify for our sponsoring groups, say the top 10 or top 10 of each. So a lot of, I'm not going to name names, but if the local media will keep in mind that just because we're going to have a list of projects doesn't mean those are all the ones that we expect the city to take seriously. We've got a prioritization job to do. So I'm just trying to give you a preview of what we're going to be talking about later today, and I think it's going to be pretty insightful. So thanks. Marcus?
You're going?
I just have a question. Can we get a status update on the street lamp data? Street lights data?
Street light?
Mm-hmm. I know we built a list of where we wanted monitors done. I heard that one of the county or the city was considering purchasing the program, but I haven't heard an update about its status, and I'd like.
So Commissioner Durden and I have a phone call with the streetlight people on Thursday to look at their data. And then separately, the city of Bernie, a separate program, the city of Bernie did end up subscribing to a separate program. And I've been meeting with the assistant city manager on that, looking at that software, comparing that versus our physical street counts to try to get a trust level of that software.
Thank you.
So could you remind us, we had a conversation at one point that the city has hired consultants to work with us, right? And so, or to work with the city, I guess. But there was something about building a model and being able to sort of play with the most efficient solutions. What's the timeline looking like at this point?
So weather depending, the last week of the month, that we're going to study 15 intersections all on the same day. So we have a date scheduled, but we'll just have to see as weather progresses.
So in other words, we'll be able to put that to use. Yeah.
So we'll have the traffic studies will be 24-hour video at 15 intersections, and then the counter will look at cars, freight, and people at every intersection and the percentages of, and then it'll be the turning movements at the intersection. So we're going to say how many people are going straight, how many people are turning right. And what.
But as I understood it, I think maybe I misunderstood it, but this consultant's going to build a model, I guess, of the city and the traffic flows, and then we can look at how.
Correct. The first step is doing the counts, and then once we have the counts, it'll take a month or two to create the models based on that.
Okay. I just see that could be very important, at least for Bernie recommendations, to have that. Thank you. It's all you, man.
I think I'm good. Jeff, I'm just kind of curious if we also had a point along 46 beyond the aggregates coming into town, downtown Bernie, as opposed to folks coming from on this side of the aggregate companies, to see what kind of differential there is between the traffics that is there versus what's here, or maybe even beyond the aggregates.
So the city study, the first intersection we're going to do is 46 and Esperanza, which is basically the limits of our city limits. So that'll be how many people are coming into the city at that location.
Okay, thanks. I'm good.
Okay, Rich? Northern? Okay, we have, let's count, I hit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, we do have a good quorum. All right, next agenda item was consideration of the approval of the minutes of December 21st, 2021, and January 4th of 2022. Did anybody have any comments or corrections?
Not move to approve the minutes with no comments.
Second. Okay, any objection? Minutes are approved. Okay. Our first of the two opportunities for public comment. Please come to the podium and give us your name and raise your hand. Who wants to visit with us? Please.
Wanda McCarthy, Ammon Road. I've come before the committee several times presenting alternatives to a 46 bypass over sensitive areas. Various suggestions have been brought back many times over the last many months, years, and almost 2 decades now, as opposed to plowing through ecologically sensitive land in the county, some of the most sensitive, not only in the county, the state, and the United States. During the last 2 meetings, I brought a mapping that I have shared with you. I can share it again. I would like to rescind the second map. Upon closer look, it appears to be very much on top of the Cibolo Nature Center, and I'd like to rescind that as an option and only project the first option of coming across right-of-way that you actually own. I have another mapping that I'd like to share at the conclusion, It's a option to expand the intersection for 46 and Esser-Herf River Road. That doesn't require any or possibly very minimal right-of-way. It would be a roadbed correction to put things into correct flow so that any backup that's occurring now would be rectified. And then on down the road, looking at a bridge system as being a second phase. In producing the bridge, I would ask that people have the long-range view, that the underlying roadbed would not be hindered by uprights and so forth, so that eventual and long-term improvements can be made for through traffic into the city, or potentially once you exclude the through road over a bridge work, that a true roundabout could be placed at that location once all the through traffic is been taken away. The bridge work should be put in place to accommodate any future expansion of the lower roadbed, as I've said before. If you do this three-phase, the traffic flow will be continually handled throughout all phases of construction. And further, all other options that have been presented through this committee, whether 3351, which I still believe needs to happen, or any other roadbed through southeast quadrant, you always have the jam up of getting onto I-10. The roadbed flyover, the raised roadbed flyover is the only option that you've been presented that doesn't have a backup joining into I-10. It will be a continual flow. So that, with all of the ecologically sensitive issues that have been brought forth over the last 20 years, the road, the water. I have another presentation that I made both in at the Kendall Gateway, and I'd like to present again today. So I ask, why are we still looking at this southeast connection over a road, over a car system that's going to affect the very water that we drink and potentially the water for the whole county? Thank you.
Thank you. Lance?
Lance Kyle, 226 Cascade Caverns Road. That's in the Bernie ETJ. At the last meeting, one of the committee members kind of made a casual remark that, everything in a lot of these green spaces around the city is developing. So why don't we build roads in these green spaces since they're developing anyway? Well, I know in my neighborhood, we've pretty much, we're fighting to keep that high density and more South Glens out of our neighborhood. Over my dead body, is it going to happen again? Lily Ranch is not a done deal, as Mayor Maxton of Fair Oaks Ranch insinuated at his presentation. We've stopped that for 2 years, and ultimately I think we can kill it, or we can seriously downsize Lily Ranch to at least 1 acre lots. We also kept Lennar out of the neighborhood. We spoke to them, and we told them about the downsides of building in this neighborhood, not just litigation, but some of the other issues having to do with shift shear with foundation cracking that we see a lot of in this area of the county, especially in Fair Oaks Ranch as well. These unstable fill piles and subsurface voids lead to a lot of foundation cracking. San Antonio has one of the biggest foundation cracking issues in the country, and of course, a lot of people try to downplay that. Anyway, there have been successes in our neighborhood. We did get rid of a lot of the speculators like Terry Adams. He's finally out of the neighborhood, but most of the large tract owners in my neighborhood, in the Cascade, Old Fred, Ammon Road Triangle, they're committed to keeping their properties, and they're committed to protecting this recharge zone. 2 properties sold near me recently, 10 acres each, and they sold to other families. I told them not to throw me under the bus. One property owner threw us under the bus a couple years ago. with South Glen, but every once in a while that's going to happen, I guess. But we are fighting for this neighborhood. Other people are fighting for their neighborhoods. We're various legs of this. These components to Gateway, I'm sorry, I got to say the word, are trying to be built or plan to be built. And again, we are. It's not a done deal. It's not a given that these areas are going to develop. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, I'm Alex Rudd, 68 La Cancion Drive in Kendall County. I thank you for all your time, and I want to make a remark on a side issue that hasn't been talked about much. However, it is very relevant to the issues of growth, new roads, especially things that are going to affect not only San Antonio, but Kendall County, Comal County, and other areas. It's been incredibly frustrating to watch as the issues of water conservation, protection of recharge zones, including the Edwards recharge zone, become a second, third, or even lower priority to private interest. I want to point out in 2018, San Antonio failed the EPA air quality test for the first time. The result was not a comment, wow, we've got a problem, let's take care of this. No, Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, sued. Governor Abbott lobbied the EPA intensely, saying the decision will hurt their county economy. Paxton, quote, the ozone rule will force costly regulations on the number of Texas counties. No remarks were made regarding the health of these residents who live in these counties, Texans affected, nor their children, the elderly, or people with chronic lung disease. In 2018, San Antonio also ranked the #1 city in the state with pediatric hospitalizations for asthma. Another office said that pollution from elsewhere worldwide, including Egypt and China, were to blame, and San Antonio really had no role in this pollution issue. I found her science to be amazing. I'd like to see where she got it, but I'm sorry, I don't know much about Egypt or why their air is here. In 2019, San Antonio was rated F for ozone pollution, according to the American Lung Association State of the Air report. In 2019, another quote by the Alamo and Area Council of Government report claimed, which is true, on-road vehicles have traditionally represented the significant source of nitric oxide and ozone in the region. In 2021, we failed the second time. Okay? And right now, considering the amount of urban sprawl, the explosion of areas such as Alamo Ranch, encroaching into Kendall County, into Comal County, and now Hondo is in sights to be devoured by San Antonio. I see no reason to think this third evaluation by the EPA will be passed by any means. The penalties of this will be severe. So it could potentially cost millions of dollars to the economy of San Antonio, monitoring and penalties of existing and new businesses, emissions testing for all residents, including cost of repairing their vehicles, and regulations on road construction and new businesses. This is not necessarily limited to just San Antonio. Comal County has been included in many of these poor air quality index states, including several that included Kendall County. So we are not exempt or safe from this simply because we have a border separating the counties. The net message here is a reminder. Every square mile of pavement, loss of green space, every cut down tree, and every additional mile driven as these commute times increase, as people sprawl further and further out, is making this problem worse. There needs to be caution on these growth predictions. San Antonio needs to reconsider its sprawl plan and perhaps change its tax incentives to improve areas within their existing city infrastructure and quit providing tax incentives to area outside city limits, such as the Texas Research Park, the Microsoft Citibank move to that area, and the Kohl's Operating Center at Rogers Ranch, and many, many others. It is time to carefully consider that the boom town and exponential growth that we're expecting may not happen because of very costly and personally expensive sanctions when our air quality decreases for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? What?
She's just getting her document errors.
Oh, okay. Okay, reminder, you'll have another chance at the end of the meeting before we adjourn. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is sort of a tag-on to the streetlight data that we were introduced to a few meetings ago, and it's been thought that bringing a larger data set, looking at traffic and congestion at key intersections in different ways, can only better inform our recommendation decisions as we move forward. And we have in our midst a rather knowledgeable committee member about what's known as the synchro models for traffic counts, and that's Steve Sharma. And he's going to address the committee and the audience about what it would be like to update or to take a deep dive using some of this additional data to inform our decisions. So, Steve, would you educate us a little bit?
I usually don't talk in this. You can hear me, right? No, Synchro is just a traffic simulation model, and it's a macroscopic model. So you get the traffic counts, you input them into the model, you input the signal timings, then you can get a feel for the operations of that intersection. You create an existing model of the AM or PM, whatever, both of them, and you kind of see how the cars are stacking up. You visually see the cars like sim traffic. You know, you're seeing the cars stack up. And then you apply a growth factor, and then you can kind of see operations in the future. And you can look at different things like, she had these ideas up here at this intersection at Herf and River Road, and you can basically create these alignments in the model and see how it would operate. And Don had asked me, he called last week and asked if I could look at Herf Road and River Road and 3351 at I-10. So I told him I could, and I don't know. I could look at various options, AM or PM, for those two intersections, and I don't know, give us an idea of what operations would be like in the future. We've looked at the traffic projections within the committee to see how much it would grow. We could obtain either through Jeff, I think you have traffic counts at Herf and River, and I could grow those volumes. And we could look at that intersection for various things. I don't exactly know what, but I'm sure Jeff has some ideas. Don has some ideas. You have some ideas. I don't know. And I've already looked at 3351 in the past. It's been a few years, so I could update that model. At that one, I looked at various kinds of intersections, DDI. In the end, though, in the future, when we grew the volumes, ended up having to have flyovers to kind of handle what we predict. And I think there might be a TxDOT schematic that shows something to that effect, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Mm-hmm. It's been a few years since I've looked. So, yeah, that's Synchro.
Bobby?
Could you explain to everybody the flyover from what end to what end?
There would be a flyover from Westbound I-10 to Eastbound 3351. It would have to span over Fredericksburg Road to tie in, because that was a big part of the congestion at that intersection was the operations at I-10 and 3351. But then when you coupled it with the old Fredericksburg Road intersection being so close, and there was a fair amount of traffic at old Fredericksburg Road, and when you try to time signals that are that close together, it's pretty ugly. And I think the mayor mentioned it last time, Westbound 3351 in the AM, there's kind of a curve as you approach I-10, and you could see the cars backing up past the curve. And then in the future, it was just worse when you grew it, no matter what you did at that intersection. So it was pretty ugly. And you can visually show that stuff, you know. But my experience also has been that people tend to believe what they want to believe, and they'll think, you know, you're kind of fixing numbers or whatever, but you just, I don't know, you just take the numbers and you run the model, and then you can optimize signal timing. I don't know what else. Yeah, that's about it. Did I cover it all pretty good, or Bobby?
Yes, it did, yeah. And you can see it stack up, and I wanted to say way past the curve.
Yeah.
To the entrance of.
Camp Stanley.
Yeah, right where Camp
Yeah.
Stanley entrance is. It's 50-car stack.
Yeah.
So traffic is going down 3351.
And we do or we don't know that TxDOT has any plans to address that.
They looked at alternatives along 3351. I know they did because I was running the traffic for them when they did about 5-6 years ago, and I think they have another consultant on board that's actually drawing the schematic or was drawing the schematic. There were some funding issues at TxDOT over the past year, so I know they put some of their schematics on hold, and I don't know if that was one of them or not. I have no idea.
I think if it was funded, you'd see it in the newspaper and you'd see it on the MPO list. And I don't think it's funded. That's my opinion.
Okay, so what's the sense of the committee about the value of seeing a visual model of some of this stuff?
I think it's important because it drives the context as to how much traffic is already there and how worse it's going to get. I know that Bear County is working on Old Fred Road, I believe. They I don't know if it's just what they're doing to it, but the county is looking at doing some work on Old Fred Road near the interchange of 3351 and I-10.
Any objection to that? Anybody? Absolutely not.
I don't think.
Okay. Well, Steve, would you put something together for the next meeting?
Yeah, no problem.
And I'm sure Jeff would be happy to put 100 hours of his time into it.
I have quite a bit of stuff I can share with you.
Okay. And I didn't want to interfere with Jeff. It was Don that asked me to look into it, and I didn't want to interfere with what he was going to be doing with his consultant.
Well, I'm sure Don will put 100 hours in too, so between them, we got it covered. Free time.
Just to be clear, though, when you're modeling, you can model a potential change in the intersection and the consequences to traffic.
Oh, absolutely. That's why you do these things, so you can identify the best option,
The best solution.
within reason, You can add all the lanes you want to on it, but, we try to be realistic about it. So, yeah, you can look at roundabouts, whatever, I won't look at roundabouts, so.
What does that mean?
No, I'm kidding. Everybody wants a roundabout.
Okay, well then we'll have that on next meeting's agenda, if that's okay with everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, the next agenda item is the one I alluded to in my remarks. I want to talk, I think everybody in the committee has a document like this in your little packet, and I have several extras.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
It's not, so it's coming off. Beyond.
Cuts off and then he comes back in. This is I-10.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
So it's not on.
this is right there.
Okay. Thank you. It's
BISD.
the thoroughfare plan.
Let me give them a minute to spread those around out there.
Not all of the county.
Some of it.
Yeah, because that's the county boundary.
Yeah, this is Kendall, come out.
Okay, so what we've got is a spreadsheet that's called KCB, FOTC, Deliverables and Schedule, and it's a reflection of an expectation that this committee's charge will be met mid-year. And so we wanted to start hanging some detail around such a goal, and what would that really take? We've spent the better part of 2 years educating ourselves and identifying projects and collecting input and doing first cuts of identifying projects. So I think we all have a good sense of where we are, but what is it going to take to get where we're concluded with our phase of this work? So on the left, what there really are 3 bolded categories: short-range recommendations, long-range recommendations, and policy recommendations that you see in the charge of this committee at the top of our agenda every time we meet. And that's where the real work, that's where all the work that everybody here is observing and participating in is to figure out what are we going to recommend to the decision makers and policy makers around those topics, multimodal as well as automobile. The 4th category on the left is the report, and that's simply and obviously is hanging the written descriptions around the recommendations that this committee makes, with some preamble chapters that we've started to work on that are just basic, like, history of Kendall County and a listing of transportation studies of the past, and on and on. You've seen the table of contents of our report, and some of that is roughly boilerplate, and we just started to draft those together. We've finished some of the policy recommendations. We've done one. We finished the wording around a couple of the policy recommendations, but not all. Now I want to draw your attention to the notes at the bottom of the left column. First is an asterisk, and it's matched up with March 29th. And it's, I think, a good news piece of information that the city of Bernie is intending to put forth to the community a bond election next November. And they want us to provide them with a shopping list of ideas that they could prioritize and select from to include in that bond election. So it seems obvious that those are going to come from short-term recommendations rather than some by November ask the public to fund some long-term thing that might be huge or not. So I focused on check marks of automobile projects and pedestrian, bike, and transit project recommendations by the time that the city really needs to hear from us so they can begin their deliberations that are very real. Those are the decision makers. So coincident with that time, right below it is the beginning, I know we're beginning this stuff already, but in terms of a real structured, focused beginning march toward a completion of the long-term automobile projects and non-automobile projects with a slated completion date in the mid-May, which gives us time to massage things afterwards before the end of June. Specific dates can slide. This was just trying to be thoughtful about what is composing our work and what are the component pieces so that we can all see what they have to be done and we can all cooperate on how to get it done. Even report writing is going to be a monumental task, and we're going to need wordsmithing, we're going to need good ideas, and then of course we have to get the content right up at the top. Those top 3 are the real heavy lifting, but the report is ultimately as a deliverable is equally important. We've got to communicate our recommendations clearly. So it's there. I'll open it up for comments, suggestions, volunteers to take on chapters of a report. Northern, you might want to give us your sense of where we're at in the project evaluations in terms of rough percentages.
I can tell you we have not touched on any of the, what we've been referring to as the controversial public comments in any of the quadrants. And it's unpredictable. I cannot predict what amount of time those will take. As far as the other, we've made it through most of the other public comments. I imagine I will need help at some point making the committee recommendations, getting them out of my personal shorthand and into a publicly available comment or explanation of what our recommendation was. But that's basically where we're at.
So what, on the short-term projects, what's your sense of how many did we pass through for full committee consideration?
I have to look at it. I have to.
We
There's
have-
a lot.
We obviously have to figure out a process for how we want to go through those. I don't know if it's weighted or something where you score things and, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great comment. I've been putting some thought into that. I think eventually, when we want to prioritize them when we're done, I almost imagine a scoring system similar to how we all scored congested intersections. If people would vote on a priority order, then we could tally up. 'Cause at that point, you remember, Don and I don't vote. We're just here. But I'll be happy to be the scorekeeper.
I think it'd be very helpful if we could get more speed involved at that short-term level in time to feed that information to Steve to look at the synchro modeling on the impact of those, top 5 or top 10 short-term projects. It seems like if we're going to have any kind of demonstration of proficiency or sufficiency, it might be to start there, which at least gives us a jump into meeting the scheduled deadline of March 29th for the short term. Another project subcommittee had a list of about 12 to 15 projects, many of whom had short-term components, some of whom the short-term component is already underway. For example, the work at Cascade Caverns in Scenic Loop Road. But there were several other intersections that were easily and immediately identifiable as have been problematic for 20 years. Adler in School in Maine. So it seems like it would be an easy start to look at that short-term list and see if we can't jump to top 5 or 10. I don't know, Steve, what is the, in terms of looking at modeling, how much time are you involved in doing a work, say, just with one changed intersection or 5 changed intersections or 10 changed intersections?
I guess it kind of depends on, so when you typically model an intersection, you do an AM and a PM peak hour. And then, so that's your existing model. Then I assume, are we just looking at it existing, or are we going to apply a growth factor for the future year analysis as well? And then you're running alternatives for those intersections.
Yeah, I think we have to. We went to the trouble to establish a view of growth, so I think we need certainly to factor that in as part of our role. We're not just trying to solve today's problems, but to anticipate what they'll be tomorrow.
All these intersections they're just single lights. There's not too many diamonds, so I don't know. I'd say 4 to 8 hours, and that includes putting together like a little summary table report to where people can understand it and develop some kind of visual. So it takes me 4 to 8 hours per intersection, I would say roughly, because you got to take the volumes, I got to take the existing signal timings and put them all into the model. So yeah.
To back up what Bitsy said about the projects committee, we looked at the different quadrants of Kendall County, but the reality is, if we're talking a city bond, and recommendations to be done by the end of March, only some of those would be in the city. So I don't think you're looking at some exhaustive list. And I agree with her. I think it'd be fairly easy to prioritize and determine what the impact would be on the folks.
I want to predict that some of well, it might be easier than I'm thinking, but it's not all about cars. And if we are going to recommend that they consider something around a trail system or a bike system or sidewalk / trail / something that moves that along, it could take a little time to get that into shape.
Yeah. I think for the automotive side of it, the demographer's report gives us a real good visual of where the growth is going to immediately happen in the next decade. And I mean, looking across the whole county is desirable, but if you want to get to the immediate, numbers game, we know that the two southern parts of the county are going to experience the heaviest growth in the next decade. And we have projects that apply to the other parts of Bernie, Center City Bernie, that we feel or felt that would move traffic more quickly to I-10 through a variety of routes. Johns Road was the one that comes to mind. And then the facilitation across Main Street at several intersections. So it seems like you could probably get to a shorter list than the 400 that we have so far. Is that about how many?
That's how many we started with. We pared it down right now.
155.
Well,
And Jeff,
if we're
Jeff,
talking
you've
about
got your
city
own
bond-
consultant that's going to do that whole network. I don't know what the time frame is for that. I know you said you're collecting the data, but
Yeah, the schedule they gave would be into February that they would now. The separate thing too is I have multiple synchro models that I can provide you that developers have given us, but they're little pieces. And if you want to put the puzzle pieces together, you can do that as well.
yeah, I could do that.
Bobby?
I wanted to say that we shouldn't get too hung up on the modeling. It's very important. Numbers are going to be important. But I was going to say, can we do outside of the city for that reason? One, not that we want to not take work away from you, Jeff, but I figured you'd be already doing that. So, but that's not the only data we need. There's going to be assumptions in that data. But when we talk about evaluating the priorities, which ones are going to have opportunities for other alternative funding sources? Maybe it was the beginning. If we had any presentations on alternative funding sources, and a lot of these funding sources, Jeff, these guys know that if the city or the county puts X amount of dollars, it moves up the chain of command, it moves up the priority listing and gets more state and federal funding. So one of these meetings, we're going to need to talk funding, or at least get a list of ones that have more potential of being funded from state or federal funding sources than others, so that they can move up the list and we can put matches together. The matching funding together. That would push them up the priority list, wouldn't they?
Well, that makes sense. I wonder if we're providing suggestions, and honestly, the city is still going to vet how they want to pursue those suggestions. I would think.
The city is. But
Well, that's
outside
fair
the
enough.
city.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm thinking about for the city bond. I don't know if the county is considering a transportation bond.
Yeah, I think I've got two quick reactions. Number one, I appreciate so far the feedback. I'm going to add a couple more check marks under like May 17th for both the short term automobile and non-automobile. So there are going to be two more check marks, because the asterisk only addresses the need of the city to prepare for a bond proposal. That does not mean that we're through making all of our other short-term suggestions. So I'm going to add two more check marks.
You don't want to do a deed sale card in your program?
And then secondly,
If you can get the voters to vote for it.
Well, Bob, your comment about the May 17th deadline, which I assume would be stuff that's more county-related, I'm assuming that's correct?
It's just all of it,
All of it.
whatever we didn't get done.
Because you got a lot of county candidates in the audience
No
today, so
kidding.
I'm glad they're here.
No, I agree. Just a second.
The city's gonna want to vote of approval on theirs too,
Right.
so we need to put those up there.
Yeah, about the funding, in our draft report and table of contents, we've already identified what data set we're going to put for each one-sheet presentation of any project. And one of the items is going to be a rough cost. We're not going to get into engineering estimates and all that, but we're going to characterize the cost of any one of these things. In my mind, I may be in the minority, but I think we could get ourselves down a rabbit trail if we spend too much time trying to figure out matching project ideas with viable funding sources rather than letting the governmental officials who sent us here make those determinations because they're closer to it. Or maybe they should be. I've certainly got an open mind about it, but I think we could spend a lot of time becoming financial experts that it just may not be our job.
When we start evaluating, let's think about it, and maybe there's a way to value scale 1 to 5.
Right. Great choice voting.
Possibility of being funded or not.
The video feed go down? Apparently so.
It's not the video feed, that's just what is on this computer screen, so it's still recording.
Oh, is that what you were getting up? You want the video back?
I was just wondering if it's being recorded?
Yes. It's
Oh, yeah.
recorded, that's just what is linked to this computer here in front of me.
So when we evaluate these things, like, I don't know, Bobby's probably seen it 100 times, we usually have a matrix, right? And I don't know if initially, if that's part of the process where everybody says, we want this project, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're going to total them up. But there's usually there's all kinds of other criteria. You can make the matrix as complicated as you want, you know. You could have something for the ADT where there's objective and subjective things. So like if the ADT of a road's 5,000 to 10,000, would that get more of a weight because it's carrying more traffic? Is it a safety improvement, you know? And then so you could have 10 things. I've seen them with 50 things, you know, but the funding thing could be part of that. Is it easily funded or, you know, and then that's a 1, a 2, or 3. So instead of just 10 people, 12 people just picking 10 projects, then that's a little more scientific, and that's what we do, but it can get bogged down in a rabbit hole sometimes when you do this, but you could do a simple one.
I mean, I don't see a problem with it. I mean, again, we're just trying to also meet a timeline, at least for the city of Bernie, but then it expands across the whole county. And I just my sense is and Jeff, you're biting your tongue maybe, but, you know, I know you guys are looking at all sorts of flood planning as well and mitigation efforts that you need to undertake that are extremely expensive. So I don't know how that all fits into the equation. And again, I feel like we are just providing some recommendations that kind of get folded in with other considerations.
Yeah, on the flood planning, obviously, that's another one that we're wrapping up a citywide drainage master plan. We'll be talking to council about that soon. But the big part there is all of City of Bernie is in the San Antonio River Basin. And so the state of Texas has multiple regional planning units. And that's something we're working with closely to get a lot of our projects that are identified in our drainage master plan, city drainage master plan, to get those into the regional master plan. Now, not all of our projects will be able to go on that list because some of them will be too small for the regional, but that's something that we'll work with. And on the transportation side of things, so we work closely with the MPO and TxDOT, and so they have 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plans that they have lists of projects, and some of them are funded projects and some are unfunded projects, and that's getting a list of projects so that we can get on those lists, whether they're funded or not funded, is a big step up.
Mm-hmm. So we are just throwing recommendations to you guys, and you have to figure out how to,
Well, let me ask a question. It's black, but it might as well be a red pen to critique my own work. From listening to this part of this conversation around Well, let's be concrete about it. The Cascade, down there at Scenic Loop and all that, got approved for future funding because it was an interim recommendation from this committee, but it was pretty large. But they said the city said we're going to put in more money than the 10%, and they raised the ante. I guess it's possible that some of the information and recommendations we could feed them by March 29th could feed into that calculus on their part to say, all right, it's not a $500,000 roundabout that we're going to build at Adler Road on a bond election, but we're going to put in 20%, 30% of something at River Road and Herf. I mean, I'm just making it up here. So maybe we do need to have a better handle on some of the longer-term, bigger projects. Because that list of 10, wherever many we had on the interim report, they were not all short-term deals. That one I just talked about certainly was not. It was a big thing. But it seemed so obvious that it ought to have been included. So I'm going to move the beginning of large project evaluations all the way back to the 1st of March. So that we're at least considering both styles. Because it could be a nuanced financing approach that the city wanted to go for. Okay. That's helpful. Thanks.
Under policy recommendations, I'm just jumping ahead of you on this, I guess, but Tim Banwolf asked me if I would draft a preserving hill country character and environment statement, and so I've started drafting that. I can definitely have it in mid-February for us to advance as people see fit or evolve, whatever.
Mine was not a development of policy, but it was just canvassing folks to just throw out one word thoughts about what is the nature and character of the hill country from their perspective. And so I've got a list of probably 121 words that I can shoot your way.
That's excellent. Well, I'd be happy to share the project this drafting with you.
Of course you would. I'd be happy to help.
Okay, that'd be good. Move that one along. We have a paragraph already under policy recommendations that we've discussed kind of at length here about how to recommend that the city do a deep dive into understanding all the pros and cons of taking over Main Street. Theoretically, what would that give them, and what would it cost in terms of alternate routes of 87 or whatever, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And then once understanding who ought to own it, then develop a downtown transportation plan that reflects that reality. And that's kind of what we've said that we believed as a policy recommendation for downtown Vernon. Yes?
If the committee can give me an idea of what they feel is proper access management, I'd be happy to give it a shot on this one. I don't think there's no draft even for access management policy recommendation. Is that correct?
I don't.
Bobby, what do you mean by that? Oh, you're talking about the item to the left here under
yes, ma'am.
Consistent roadway standards?
Under consistent, yes. I believe that means it's come up before in one of the committee meetings, and it needs to be written, so I'm offering to help write it, but.
That's great. Can you tell me what it is?
Well, to me, access management is looking at the purpose and need of the road, restricting driveways. Maybe it's looking at medians, center turn lanes only in certain areas. A lot of cities, a lot of even rural areas got access management just to keep vehicles and even bicycles going from point A to point B without interruption. So it's a policy that when you try to limit access management, you have fewer driveways, you have more precise or at least defined left turn, right turn movement. You're moving from all of these folks or whomever goes through there, small or large volumes of traffic, and it's very deliberate travel way.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I used the word deliberate in there somewhere. Is that what y'all think access management is? Is that why it came up here?
It was in the table of contents of the report. I just lifted it out and put it down here. I think there are some words drafted in there, and I'll make sure that, I believe Don's the keeper of the Word document, but I'll ask him.
Regardless of on that one.
I found on a draft that I had here on my computer, there's only one sentence under access management, one strategy to preserve capacity in roadways to limit the number of intersections and driveways, strategy known as access management, and then he's got the highlighted more, so he wants to write more. That's what his opening line for that paragraph was back in December.
So it's a pretty blank sheet of paper, Bobby.
Screw it up. Don't screw it up.
It's yours. Don't screw it up.
Hot air. Hot air, so I'm kidding. I'll help out with that.
And then you sent us revised wording on the
Yes, sir.
perpetuating this process.
You want me to bring it up? I didn't see it printed out or anything, but I could read it if you all hadn't had a chance.
Who all did you send it to?
I
sent
got
it to the whole
one.
committee.
Full committee got it.
Last meeting, Chairman Don
Yeah.
asked to send it to the full committee, so I did get a couple of comments. I didn't get any revisions, just some slapstick comments at my ability to be loquacious. But I was able to complete the transportation advocacy policy. You saw that in front of you. For those in the public, it doesn't change much. It just adds what we discussed last meeting. And then from that transportation advocacy dialogue, we got a sense that we wanted to make sure multimodal connectivity and multimodal use was prioritized and defined, because I don't think there was anywhere in the policy recommendations where we defined multimodal. So I believe I've done both, and the proposed policy recommendation would be: the committee recommends that all regional local government entities collaborate to adopt a uniform and consistent approach to developing projects that are multimodal and utilize context-sensitive designs when possible / warranted. We can use both, we can use one or the other word. The region's multimodal infrastructure system shall include, but are not limited to, trails, bike lanes, pedestrian paths, sidewalks and crossings, and transit links and park and pool facilities. Park and pool, different than a park and ride. VIA's calling them park and pools because people are allowed to go there and drop off one car and they go do a carpool either with VIA's vehicles or somebody else's vehicle. So that's why I called it a park and pool.
Okay.
So that's the story. I don't need to stick to it unless y'all want to revise it, or if y'all want to keep it like that, we'll just move forward.
Let me ask, has anybody on the committee got heartburn with that certainly as a placeholder? I like to put it in there, populate that bucket. You've done good work, let's get it in there. If, as during our deliberations, we want to change it, then we can. I'm not a voting member of this committee. Is there any motion?
Does that fit with, Ben, with the work that you're doing?
I wanted to, if I may ask that, and I don't want to stick words in your mouth, man, but context-sensitive designs do look at character. In this case, the hill country character. They look at does there need to be access management? Does there need to be? It's taken an important transportation issue and starting with what's needed in the community, backed up into, okay, maybe this is what we need, and it's this. Okay, now let's start looking at layouts. Now let's start looking at here, there, everywhere for an alignment.
So I heard context-sensitive design, and I thought bingo, because that's exactly right. I agree with that entirely. I agree with you too, Bob. Let's go ahead and throw it in there, and what do they say, the committee builds a camel, but at the same time, let's go ahead and throw some of these pieces together, and then what we do is, if we need to massage them, we massage them, but, I mean,
We
on
need
the,
to take them out, we can take them out.
on the face of it, I think it's fine, so.
And my only reaction to your context-sensitive solution comment, which was great, was I'm pretty sure I heard you say if applicable or something. Maybe it just should be more firm.
When possible and warranted, or possible warranted, not if applicable.
I felt like you were trying to take a position that it was possible and warranted.
To developing projects that are multimodal and utilize context-sensitive designs.
Period.
That's one option we can put in there. I respect that.
I think that makes sense. I mean, sometimes the context may be that, we're taking existing infrastructure and refining it, but other times we're going to be sensitive to the contours of the land and the character of the natural environment. It varies, it's context, right? It's context sensitive.
Okay, I'll take it out.
Okay, so you guys okay with
I am,
adopting that?
I am.
Bobby, thank you for doing that.
Yes, sir. No problem. Okay.
Okay, any other comments about this schedule so far? I'll issue a cleaner revised version. So for those of you in the audience, what you'll see next out printed on the schedule will be the changes that you just heard discussed about shifting some dates around and duplicating the check marks on the small short-term projects beyond the city's deadline to include outside of the city. All right. Well, since I'm so much more efficient than Don Durden, we are at the time to have a second go around of public comment. So I've been warned that there may be some requests or comments about the fact that all of our draft report documentation is not available as much as it should be for public review. So I'd like to capture that as specifically as I can. Anybody have a comment out there? Please.
Thank you, Tom Adelstein, Kendall Point. You talked about the modeling, which raised my thoughts about one of the concerns I have with transportation at school traffic, and how much that does at the beginning of the day and end of the day, and taking bends or, he looked at the wide nodes, narrow roads, and I looked at what's on the internet about school traffic and what can be done. And there's not a lot out there, but they talked about staggered starting times, which I think we do, more vehicle waiting space at school or adjacent properties, incentivized bus usage, specific bus lanes, temporary or permanent, redesigned intersections. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it is a huge issue, and it is only at certain times. But when you talked about modeling today, I was wondering if we could throw in some modeling about the school times and see if there's anything we can do by looking at other ideas that, just people are maybe not looking at. I think if we can help with the school traffic, that's something that would take away a large part of our inside Bernie traffic issue. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that on our transportation planning, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if can you hear me okay? Just we do look at school time too. If we have the traffic count available at that time, then yeah, I can throw that to the model. It all depends on what that peak is, basically. Sometimes the peak is 9 a.m., sometimes it's p.m., sometimes it is a school. So we do look at school time too.
And I guess I was thinking about throwing in, I know in my little neck of the woods, there's a little elementary school and middle school, and people all want to make it right. If they just had a right turn to make it right, that would move things along, because everybody else who's going straight has to wait, and they're waiting because it's backed up. And what would happen if we modeled a right turn lane? We might have to buy a right-of-way, and Rich and I have talked a little bit a long time ago that the schools maybe don't have a lot of land, but maybe the city or county throw in a little money to buy a right-of-way to make something like that. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so just what I was going to say is that one of the conversations I think I had with Rich a while back, and the transportation, I'm blanking on his name, who used to join us, the transportation gentleman from BISD, but there's definitely some interest in trying to even, move kids off of the buses as well and get them, using micromobility, using bikes and other things to get to school, because it not only can certainly benefit us from a transportation standpoint, but it benefits them from a financial standpoint. Buses cost money as well, just as, other infrastructure.
So John Ramirez's information and recommendations relative to the school are buried in the project subcommittee notes and minutes that are part of the record that we've got on the website. And that would, I don't know if they've been collected as a whole, but they are included in the minutes for, I guess, April till July.
They would be, but as we talk about city projects, and I'll just give an example. Land was purchased for the respective 8th elementary school, which is not in the city limits, but one of the subcommittee's recommendations was to create a walking path and a bike path from 2 neighborhoods that are in the city limits that would relieve a lot of traffic, and that would be, I think, money well spent, because it would open up easy access to the new school.
I think a lot of the first part of those project subcommittee report were directly about schools, right turn lanes, center turn lanes, acceleration and deceleration lanes, using the existing right-of-way along the roads that we have without putting any new monies out for right-of-way. So it is interspersed in our reports and is part of the project subcommittee recommendations.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember a lot of really good ideas coming out of the BISD work. One of the agenda items, just to be clear, we talked about the access management, but right below it's the connectivity. And a lot of that dialogue was around the fact that our neighborhoods aren't interconnected very well. These cul-de-sac neighborhoods, so that, I don't know which bucket that really fits in.
Take the fence down and all of a sudden the problem is solved.
Well, even to the point where they were suggesting that they try to get HOAs to unlock the gates for a couple hours in the morning and a couple in the afternoon at school times, because, the clear message is pretty clear from HOAs. We don't know we're not going to open our fences permanently, but would they ever agree to do it just so kids could get back and forth to school and soccer moms wouldn't have to get out on 46? It's something that was raised, and the issues that it put on the bus drivers and the buses themselves, and the extra miles and extra time and extra staff, and reduce safety and increase congestion.
I know Comel ISD won't drive into a gated neighborhood unless the gates automatically open in the evening, in the mornings. So
That'd be good.
So that's how they have solved that problem. If they want the school bus to come into your neighborhood to pick kids up, you have to open the gates for them. So that's an idea.
It's a good idea.
And if they don't, they force the kids to stand right in front of the gates so that nobody can get out.
Okay, Beth.
Hi, my name is Chris Taylor. I'm at 114 Noble Woods in Bernie, Texas. I just want to offer what I've done for a career is facilitate committees when they come down to needing to make decisions and vote on. For example, if you have 100 projects and you need to get it down to 10, I can come help you either in a committee or subcommittee narrow that down, doing a doability and impact quadrant. Some of you may have done that before, but I'm just offering that for free to come help you guys if you would like any assistance in narrowing those projects down once you come up with that. And then you would take that and then present that to the local government that's requesting the idea. So just want to offer that for you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
Hello again, Alex Rudd, 68 La Concepcion in Kendall County. I noted an item here on the agenda, and unfortunately I missed the last meeting. It mentions residential density with a target completion on April 5th. I am curious as to what that pertains to. Personally, I think if we don't get that under control, we are going to have massive traffic problems no matter what we do. Because the amount of potential land for development, especially along Highway 46, is huge. And if we continue to add multifamily, subdivisions with thousands of homes, we will be looking at Loop 1604 in San Antonio, which is now being widened to 10 lanes. And they say that probably won't be enough by the time that's finished. I believe if rezoning was possible, or if the city could come up with a comprehensive plan, perhaps cooperating with landowners, we have to get density under control somehow, some way. We cannot sustain unlimited growth, unlimited density, and urbanize Kendall County. It's not meant for that. We have the ecology and the environmental sensitivity that does not support it. And I hope that this can be addressed in a manner that will really help the community and help us manage these problems.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Thank you, Alex. We do have some maps on our website that identify what parts of our community or county, Bexar County, Comal, and the city. And because of my involvement with Richard Elkins, my commissioner, trying to get a House Bill 3883 passed this past year, the county essentially has no ability or very limited ability to constrain density unless you're on a well, and then you have your Cow Creek rules. And I think the city has done a pretty good job with their UDC of clarifying how they want development to occur in the community. I don't think we were talking about doing anything more than supporting the need for density restrictions. I don't think that there was anything that we really could contribute to make that happen other than to write our support of the need for. So it took myself a long time to understand that Austin and our legislators are where that fight needs to go to. And that's probably all
I agree with everything you said. I've always been a fan of a county strategic plan, and it's not a guarantee because it's not enforceable, but it's about at least how do you channel all the resources in the county toward fulfilling that strategic plan, everything from leveraging the bureaucracy to slow down some development applications to incentivizing better development practices like Hays County is working on for conservation development. The other thing, too, of course, is that we've talked about, some limited access roadways that would, where you minimize the curb cuts, or at least you put them where you'd want certain features perhaps to go, whether it's industrial or commercial, and limit them elsewhere to influence development patterns. So, it's the best strategy we have at this point, given how the state holds all the reins.
Does that come out of the county transportation plan?
I think that I think it would be a hybrid with the county transportation plan. And in other words, I think it's almost the missing component that layers on top or layers within this with what we're talking about. I mean, transportation is kind of the backbone of those plans, around which everything else gets added on. And it'd be nice to do it holistically, I will say that, but we're not taking that approach currently. Other counties are doing it. Guadalupe County's doing it. Hays County's got they've got one. Travis County has one. I mean, it's not unheard of, and I think we'd be wise to learn their lessons because They decided to come to this conclusion later in the game than we could, if we're wise enough to realize that other ideas from other counties are worth employing here.
Good. Lance?
Lance Kyle, 226 Cascade Caverns Road. A lot of people like to throw the county under the bus when it comes to development and their, limitations based on, state statute. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like every 5 home per acre subdivision in this county is in the city limits. So I'm scratching my head every time I hear that over and over and over again. The county got the developer at George's Ranch, even though they're getting pipeline water, to commit to 1 acre minimum lots. Also, most of the apartment complexes in Kendall County are in the Bernie city limits, at least 2/3. So, the county, yes, statutorily has more limited powers than a home rule city. From my perspective, the city is not using its powers. To me, the future land use map, some of the zoning changes, the UDC, the master plan have all been a failure. I think they need to be revised again. We've got another 4 to 5 home per acre subdivision when you X out the common spaces going in at 25 Cascade Caverns Road. Nothing's changed. Anyway, let me add something on a separate note. Chairman Manning, I wanted to add to your earlier comment. Could the keeper of the draft committee report send the latest copy to the, I guess you could call Northern the Scriba, so she could post it on the website? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Lance, my reaction to your first set of comments is this eternal debate around the smartest version of growth is you have a very dense pocket of development so that you can have massive unpopulated areas versus you spread things out with ranchettes and cover the hillsides. There's no right answer to that. It's an eternal debate. And you just clearly, you eloquently described the conundrum. For everything that looks like it's an advantage under one of those models, it's the disadvantage in the other. So I hear you very clearly. I've been to a lot of seminars where we did a master plan during my tenure on council where a national consultant guided the community through a process that said to do just that. Densify the heck out of your dwellings and your commercial development and leave the rest alone. And that's the model that they were trying to have us pursue. We didn't do a very good job of it, but that was the theory. So thanks. Sure.
Lance and I are regulars at the microphone. I just want to add one more comment. The recommendation that I made for a raised road bypass flyover, it's the only one that has absolute limited access. You have a point A and you have a point B, and there's no additional development going to happen on the road that wasn't already going to happen, as opposed to opening miles and miles and miles of greenfield roads. Then the development will happen. I don't care how hard you try. Any other amount of time I'd like to pass out.
All right. More stuff. Sure. Any other comments? We have a lot of really smart people out there. Any comments from the committee? Any resignations?
No, Bob, my only comment would be I appreciate this timeline that you put together, that we adhere to that. I think it'll give this committee a sense of accomplishment if some of the good ideas that have been generated in some of the subcommittee work are approved and then approved by the city council and approved by the voters, we'll actually see some progress towards dealing with these issues. So I'm hopeful.
Well put. I agree with you. Okay, folks, go home and wrap pipes. You've got one more day before it gets chilly again. Be safe. We're adjourned.
Don't look, think about